I'm here with Raina Brands. She's Assistant Professor of Organisational Behaviour at London Business School. She's a speaker at the 2019 Women at Work Conference on INSEAD's Singapore campus. Thank you for being here.
Great to be here.
So you presented some really interesting findings regarding ways we might be able to intervene to reduce the gender wage gap. Can you elaborate?
Sure. And I have to emphasize that these are really preliminary findings. But my colleagues and I were interested in an intervention that's been trialled in some states in the US and some companies in the US, which is the salary history ban. So this essentially means that managers can't ask about a candidate's current or prior salary before offering them a position.
And how did this experiment work?
We first looked at it in an online experiment. So this is a very controlled paradigm, if you will. We were testing this kind of key assumption by setting up a really simple online paradigm where people were making offers to hypothetical candidates who were either men or women. And half of the participants got to see prior salary information for these hypothetical candidates, and half the participants didn't receive any prior salary about these hypothetical candidates. And so what we see in this very kind of reduced control paradigm, that this salary history ban does seem to work. There's no difference between the amount of money being offered to men or women. So this is, I guess, encouraging for this as an intervention, but it seems much more complicated when we started to look at it in real-world contexts. So one of the real-world contexts that we looked at was a recruitment firm that has voluntarily adopted this salary history ban as part of their practices. So they gave us the database of all of their placements that they've made. So we have about 4,000 placements prior to them implementing this ban, and then we have some observations after implementing this ban. And what we find there is that a more complex, nuanced picture. So what we see is that once that ban is in place, everybody starts to negotiate higher salaries. We see the wage gap actually intensify between men and women, in that men seem to be able to use this lack of anchor to their benefit more so than women.
That's interesting. You know, obviously people always talk about a negotiation skills gap mapped against a gender wage gap, and they sometimes will then use it to put the onus back on the woman, say you need to learn to negotiate rather than we need to investigate bias.
Right, yeah, so I should really need to emphasize we don't know what is at play here. You know, we're still looking at the mechanisms that might be underlying this effect. But it does give us some information that certainly companies can use. This idea that if this price salary ban was just acting on the hiring side, so it's just taking away the anchor for people who are trying to make offers, then it would be really effective. But the field data suggests that clearly it's not just acting on the hiring manager's side. It also seems to be affecting the candidate. So that it could be, in the absence of this anchor, that is a clear signal about your market value. Men's market value seems to increase because competence stereotypes favor them, and women seem to decrease. So yes, it could be a negotiation story, but it could also be a stereotyping story. It could also be something else. It's too early to say.
It speaks to the complexity of applying any of these interventions.
Exactly, and that's what companies really need to keep in mind, that really good ideas often have unintended consequences, and there's often a gap between the enacted and the espoused. And that's certainly, in all the qualitative evidence that we've gathered in our research, really speaks to that there's a lot of issues around non-compliance. So you might put this ban in place, but whether managers use it is another question. And we're seeing non-compliance rates of up to sort of 20–30%, which is quite high.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.